Praveen Agarwal, Managing Director of Admin Packaging, as also Executive Council Member of Indore Management Association, to take the proceedings of the next session, please.
Good morning, everybody. We are now beginning the next business session, the business session 1, on the theme of managing turbulent times, on day 2 of IMA's International Management Conclave 2011. For this session, we have two eminent speakers with us, Mr. D. Shivakumar, who is the Managing Director of Nokia Asia Pacific, and Dr. Subhadra Rao, President and Chief Economist of Yes Bank. I would request Mr. Abhishek Sanghvi, Vice Chairman of iLead, to escort Mr. D. Shivakumar and Dr. Subhadra Rao on the stage, please. I would request Mr. Alok Jain to come up and do the floral welcome of Mr. D. Shivakumar on behalf of IMA. I would request Mr. Abhishek Nandedkar to come and do the floral welcome of Dr. Subhadra Rao on behalf of IMA. I would request Mr. Abhinav Srivastav to do the floral welcome of Mr. Abhishek Sanghvi. Can we have the AV introduction of Mr. D. Shivakumar, please?
Mr. D. Shivakumar, connecting people across India, across the Middle East and across Africa. Based in Dubai, Mr. D. Shivakumar touches these geographies as Senior VP for Nokia. A go-for-growth leader, Shiv is known to have grown more than 34 brands in his long and growing career so far. Shiv lectures at business schools all across the globe, and the performance of Team Nokia India under Shiv's leadership has been case studied at Harvard, ISB and various Ivy League schools of business as well. Mr. D. Shivakumar has earned for himself many an award. One of the top 5 marketers in India, Brand Builder of the Year in 2008. Best CEO 2009. And recently, his alma mater, IIM Calcutta, awarded him their Most Distinguished Alumnus Award in November 2011. Connecting awards, you might say, sir. We heartily welcome Shiv, as he is fondly known amongst his friends. A big hand for him, ladies and gentlemen.
Before I invite Mr. Shivakumar to address the gathering, can we have the AV for IMA also, please?
In early August 2010, Chile's San Jose copper and gold mine collapsed, trapping 33 miners underground. Even in the best of situations, rescuing them would have taken months. There were already widespread apprehensions about rescuing the miners alive. The perseverance of the miners trapped in a lightless dark space and the enormously complex operation to rescue them is a classic example of human will triumphing against great odds. As a small contribution to the rescue efforts, NASA dispatched a 4-person team to provide support. It was familiar with the situation, as its astronauts have to endure similar isolation and cramped spaces in the course of their mission preparation. 2 passageways, each about 9 inches in diameter, connected the miners with the world above, supplying them food, water, medicine, and telephone lines. The miners kept themselves alive by rationing supplies. After 17 days, many were close to starvation. Special rescue capsules, barely 21 inches in diameter, were designed. These capsules would travel through 2 narrow tunnels inside the earth to a distance of almost 3/4 of a kilometer to rescue the miners one at a time. It took 69 days from the day of the accident to bring the miners out of confinement, and it was hope that kept them alive. Leaving last, like a ship's captain, the mine's shift supervisor, Louis Urzua, whose disciplined and inspiring leadership kept the men alive, was the last miner to make the journey to the surface. IMA salutes the strength of will, the indomitable spirit of these miners.
Thank you. May I now request Mr. D. Shivakumar to address the gathering, please.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here this morning on Saturday. It's my pleasure to be here. For some time now, the Indore Management Association has asked me to come and do this session, and they've always told me about the grand setting and the audience here. Seeing it is absolutely believing it. I could not do it over the last 2 years because I had other commitments, and it clashed with one of the board meetings which I had to attend. But I'm really happy here, very happy that there are about 2,500 students here. I believe leaders such as myself and other people who are here owe a lot and have to invest a lot in the students because they are our future. That's something which always excites me, and I'm really happy to see so many of young people here to actually participate in this conference. That's something which I really, truly value. The topic which I've been asked to speak about is turbulence, which is leading in turbulent times. There's absolutely no doubt that the world is going through a turbulent phase. There's absolutely no doubt that we, in some areas, are experiencing some turbulence. There's absolutely no doubt about that. What I'm going to talk to you about is how companies manage turbulence. What are the principles of managing turbulence when you're running a company, number one. But the principles of running a company are no different, I believe, from running a society or a family or individually. The same principles you can distill to say these apply to me in one way or the other. Mr. Tharoor, who spoke before me, we overlapped 5 years ago, 4 years ago. We were at Kellogg's, the American Institute, where the topic was India of the future. And as always, it's a pleasure to listen to Mr. Tharoor and his views. So what am I going to cover for you today? First, what are the reasons for turbulence? Everybody experiences turbulence, but first you need to identify why does this occur? Okay, is this just happening? Is it happening to me? Is it happening to my company? Is it happening to my society? What are the reasons for turbulence? Second, what's happening in the Indian economy right now? And two concepts I want you to think about, which is how do you manage in as you go into turbulence? More important, how do you manage out as you get out of turbulence and look at the straight road ahead? And then a quick summary. First, turbulent times. They can happen for three types of reasons. Number one, the external environment is volatile, turbulent. Second, it can be internal to a company. Something the company does or does not do leads to turbulence, self-created. Third, a competitor can inflict turbulence on you. Okay, so there are three types of turbulence which a corporation would go through: external, internal, and competition-induced. Let's look at external environment today. If you look at the external environment today, there's absolutely no doubt that our GDP is slowing down. If you look at today's newspaper, they're saying 6.9. Earlier, we were talking of 8 and 9. The difference between 6.9 and 8.9 looks very small too. But on an economy of this size, 1.3 to 1.5 trillion, that's a hell of a lot. It's not small. So in a way, we've started accepting 6.9 and 7. That is the new normal for a country like India at this point of time. Why is this important? If you look at the last 20 years, in 20 years, real incomes have multiplied in this country thanks to the liberalization. It's very important for India to have a good growth rate. We cannot afford to slip back in terms of our growth rate. So growth is certainly slowing down. Okay, there's no doubt about it at this point of time. Second, as reflected, let's look at the stock market. Absolutely volatile. It's come off a very high in January 2011 at about 20,000. Today it's at about 16,000 in a matter of 11 months. Okay, that's a drop of about 25%. Okay, that's a lot again. It's not small by any measure. The Indian rupee, very volatile. In January this year, we are looking at about 45. Currently, we are looking at 52. That's 18% off, which means for companies and corporations which I represent, our volume growth has to be 18% more for us to have the same value growth. Okay, very challenging. The benefit of this, of course, is that if your costs are in dollars, it helps you, that's all. But that's a very short-term help, it's not worth it. Having a stable rupee, and somewhere I believe between 45 to 47 is what makes sense for us. Okay, so GDP down to 6.9%, Sensex down by 25%, and the rupee-dollar ratio off by about 18%. Is that turbulent? It's certainly turbulent. It's not small. The trouble is all of them have come together at the same time, as they invariably do. So when you look at external turbulence, which is what I've described, the first thing we need to think about, whether as a company leader or the leader of a family seeing this through, how long will this last is the first question. So we need to put our best minds together to say, how long will this happen? How long will this last? Second, what's the effect of this turbulence on the industry which I represent or which you represent? And second, on your particular company. That's the second question you need to answer. Third, what actions do we need to take based on the effects we expect going forward? And finally, how do you communicate this to the wider audience who is your company and to the wider society? What do we need to do to communicate within our own company and to start influencing other people? So this is what one would tend to do when you're dealing with turbulence arising out of an external situation. Internal to company. The most important reason why a company goes through turbulence, self-inflicted as I call it, is leadership. If you look at the history of companies over the last 200 years, there are two reasons why companies fail big time. Number one, arrogant leadership. Number two, inability to learn and unlearn. That's the reason it happens. So leadership and its effect leads to a huge internal turbulence. So it's very important at any point of time to have stable, forward-looking leaders. The second reason why in a company you get turbulence is lack of accountability. When you have a lack of accountability in a company, you get a lot of turbulence. Leadership has a 3-time effect in terms of the results which a company generates. Lack of accountability, on the other hand, actually drains companies. So that's the second one. That's why companies go through internal turbulence. Third is the processes they follow. People take shortcuts, people do the wrong things. We've heard about the oil spills, etc. Could have been avoided if somebody had followed a process. Okay, that's the other reason. Lack of adherence to a process is what hurts companies and they go into turbulence. Most important of all, people start thinking short term. Look at the banking sector as a great example. When you think of your next quarter results and your next quarter bonus and don't worry about the long-term health of either the company or the industry, then you put the whole industry and yourself into a tailspin. So these are the reasons why a company internally would have turbulence. Leadership, lack of accountability, not following the right process, and always putting short-term ahead of long-term. Competitor inflicted. All of us are in the market trying to win the mind and the hearts of the consumers. Some competitors do it well, some don't. Invariably, when you have turbulence inflicted on you from a competitor, you need to ask yourself first, what's the answer? How long will it take to get the answer out into the marketplace? Once you've decided that, as the leader of the company or the board, you need to inspire the troops in the short term towards that answer. Next, while you're doing this, you have to be absolutely clear that while you're playing catch up, you also need to start leading. It's not enough to play catch up because somebody else will now set the new rule. So you have to change the area of play if you don't want to be in the turbulent phase. And finally, you always have to play to your strengths. You have to look at the advantages that you can create in that whole ecosystem. So key questions in turbulent times. How to conserve cash without sacrificing strategic investments. All costs are good costs or bad costs. And you have to think of costs like that and invest significantly on the people side as you go through turbulence. How do you deal with volatility? How does a company deal with an exchange rate which is there right now? How do you deal with it? Each company will have its philosophy, but you have to have a clear answer. You cannot live from day to day. For example, if you're dependent on imports, will you assume that the dollar will be 55 or will you assume it's 52? If you assume that the dollar is 52, you will need a price increase every second day or every week if the dollar goes up to 52.30. If you assume the dollar is 54, it gives you a cushion for 3 to 4 months. A very simple point like that. You have to start thinking about your pricing in that context. How do you keep employee morale up amidst uncertainty? Okay? People do not like ambiguity and uncertainty. Anybody, whether it's an individual, whether it's a family, whether it's a society, or whether it is a corporation, they don't like it. I was in Dubai 3 days ago. I was meeting a bunch of classmates from IMA Calcutta. Almost all of them asked me, Shiv, are our investments in India safe? What do you think is happening in India? And I told them, India is absolutely safe, don't worry. But the uncertainty which is being created, okay, is affecting them. Nobody likes uncertainty. Nobody likes ambiguity in life. And I think the earlier you resolve it, the better it is. And finally, how do you manage in and out, which is what I'll talk about. First, a turbulence is a great chance to change the game. A turbulence is a great chance to change the game. It is not something to be afraid of. Good companies embrace turbulence and say, I will alter what I'm doing in order to win for the future. It's a great chance. Don't be worried about it. Take it as an opportunity. If you look at every turbulent period in history, 3 out of the top 10 firms in every industry drop out of that list in turbulence. Okay? Just 3 out of 10 just drop out. It's an enormous place for you to get fitter and better. The inefficient invariably do not survive a turbulent phase. That's the second lesson. Third, successful management of turbulence happens in 2 areas. Managing in, we are all entering a turbulent phase. I believe this will be there for the next few months at least. Okay, we've seen it coming for some time. How do you prepare as you go into it, and how do you ensure as you go on? Managing in for me is very much like the Formula 1 race. When you're going around the bend, you don't go at full speed. You cut down your speed, you adjust everything to ensure that you take the curve properly, so that when you hit the straight full, You're absolutely full on the pedal and you're really accelerating out on the out. Okay, so managing in is managing a curve. You have to be very careful as to how you maneuver the curve. If you take it at too much speed, you'll go out of gear. You'll just spin out and you won't be in the race anymore. The first set about managing in is the mindset. You have to slow down and think. You cannot blindly start betting and taking risks. You have to slow down. The whole management team and the board needs to step back and say, develop alternate scenarios. What's the worst which could happen? What's the likely which can happen? What do we need to do? You have to start thinking like that. You cannot go full throttle when you're managing the curve. Second, while you're doing the managing in, a simple rule, always play to your strengths. A lot of companies make the mistake of trying to copy somebody else in the industry and they start playing to their weakness. Somebody says, okay, the other industry or the other competitor is doing this, let's start following that. That doesn't help. The key thing in any turbulence is play to your strengths. Identify a list of strengths that you have as a company, as an individual. What are the top 5, 6 things? Play to your strengths. That's what I would say. Next, when you're managing in, manage your costs. You have to keep costs under control. You have to manage them in a very different way. And fourth, as I mentioned, put the plans. Most optimistic, most pessimistic. It's quite likely that what you will end up with is somewhere in between. But you have to assume the worst if you want to get out of a turbulence. You have to assume the worst. So what's the worst which can happen to the Indian rupee? What's the worst which can happen to our GDP? What's the worst which can happen? Ask that question. Then you'll suddenly find the answers to that in a much sharper manner. Managing in requires value thinking. Why? Most consumers start conserving their cash and their wallets when they're managing in. You have to give a consumer a very good reason. You have to alter the value to the consumer for him to come and buy your brand or your category. Okay. In terms of tactics, some of the mistakes people make, and I will talk about it, they cut quality. Never cut quality. Consumers can actually figure out very quickly that you've cut quality. Okay? So cutting quality is not an answer in managing turbulence. Okay? Improving value is very important. Maintaining quality is very important. The moment you cut quality, consumers notice it, you'll never come back. Okay? Reframe the category and see what you can do, and mix the categories and see what you can do, and I'll give you examples of that. First, focus on quality. This story is from the 70s and 80s. Chocolate prices up, sugar prices up. Kit Kat decided to cut its quality versus Mars. Mars, on the other hand, decided to keep its quality. Over a two-year time frame, the consumers could actually see that the quality of Kit Kat had dropped. Kit Kat never came back to market leadership after that, even 40 years later. Never. A very simple example for a very simple category, which is chocolates. Packaging options. Rethink the cost and the value to the consumer. Here's Vittel, the same bottle, they trimmed down their cost by about 29% as they went through turbulence. No cost is a sacred cost when you're managing turbulence. Every single cost needs to be thought about, whether it's salary, whether it's bonus, whether it's packaging. You have to ask yourself the tough questions on optimizing what you're doing. Signaling price sensibly. If you go out and say sale, 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 consumers don't buy it for you. You have to alter it and talk about value. Everybody in India keeps talking price, but the behavior of the consumer is much more value and much less price. So you have to signal the value which consumers can get out of your category, not price alone. Price alone is not going to win you the war in a turbulent phase. Next, this is happening right now. These are things we thought were Indian. Sachets, 50 paisa sachet, 1 rupee sachet, 2 rupee sachet. Today you have a €1 yogurt pack in France. You have a $1 ketchup pack in America from Heinz. Everybody is now rethinking the concept of having a fixed price and ensuring that you deliver value to consumers. Okay, this is something which emerging markets have done for the last 25 years. Because of the economic uncertainty and turbulence in the Western world, most categories are going into this format right now. People are not spending on big packs. People are reframing their purchase into dollar packs, euro packs. This is what is happening, and all these companies have benefited from their initiatives. Mixed category. Which other category can I go together with? So here's a detergent category with a fabric brand going together. So who other in the ecosystem, which other player in the ecosystem can you partner with to ensure that both of you benefit? Because you will not be able to spend a lot, he will not be able to spend a lot. But by combining forces, you can ensure that you deliver new value to the consumer. So ask yourself, in your industry, whom can you collaborate with in this turbulent phase? And there are many people out there who have the same problem as you do. Okay? Next, those who are managing in. Managing out requires a very different mindset. You've seen the managing in part, you've cut your costs, you've trimmed everything, you've altered value to the consumer. Managing out requires a very different philosophy. And long-term winners in managing out invariably invest more in innovation, invest more in advertising, and actually bring in better talent employees to the company. Okay, so while you're managing in, the board and the managing director need to think about, are we cutting our innovation? Are we cutting the spend on advertising? Are we cutting, recruiting great talent? The history of advertising shows that every brand which invests in a recession, in turbulence, invariably gains faster than anybody else. So there's a common notion, especially for finance professionals, to say, let's cut advertising. It's the most visible expenditure. Let's cut innovation. It's the most visible expenditure. But cutting advertising and innovation in a turbulence is like saying, you're in an aeroplane with 4 engines, you're flying through turbulence, and then you say as a pilot, okay, let me cut off 2 engines and I'll still fly. Theoretically, you can still fly. You can do that, no problem. But you'll hurt the long-term prosperity of your brand and company. So for me, managing out is about over-investing in innovation and advertising and not cutting it. Get new people to the table, people who have a challenger mindset to say, I like this situation because it's challenging and I believe I can add something to it. The mindset of the employee you have is very important as you go through this phase. Next, you need to support current employees. I mentioned that you cannot have ambiguity and uncertainty. The worst thing in employees is for them to feel insecure. The day a workforce feels insecure, the productivity in the company drops significantly. You cannot let that happen. And the job of a CEO and senior management is to constantly communicate the strategy, constantly communicate what's happening. Employees don't mind uncertainty. They don't mind it. They want to have a clear benchmark as to when it will get over. So if you are standing before your employees, you need to clearly tell them, I think this will last 9 months. By September of this year, we should be okay. Now for 9 months, let's tighten the belt. Let's do this. Then they have great clarity. It's very much like when you go through turbulence. I'm a very nervous flyer, though I fly a lot. I'm a very nervous flyer because my dad passed away in an airline accident in 1993. So I'm a very nervous flyer from that. So every time I get on a flight, I tell my mom I'm on a flight. Every time I get on, I tell my mom I've arrived. When I go through turbulence, I really love pilots who tell me, the turbulence for the next 10 minutes, fasten your seatbelt, we are fine. It gives me peace of mind. I know that I need to hold on for the next 10 minutes. The worst is some airlines. You're going through turbulence, they don't say anything. Then you're wondering if the pilot is awake or asleep or what is he doing at the controls. It's the same philosophy. Employees go through the same thing. They want to know from the leader and from the board, where is the end point? So you have to communicate that. You have to support your employees. And finally, strengths. I keep saying this again and again. Whenever you're in turbulence, whether as an individual or a family or society or a company, play to your strengths. Today, India is going through turbulence. If we play to our strengths, we'll win. Today, companies go through turbulence. You play to your strengths, you'll win. Tomorrow, as an individual, you'll go through turbulence. Play to your strengths, you'll win. Do not play to your weakness or your opposition's strength. So in summary, I would say managing turbulence today at a national level, international level, is an absolute imperative. You cannot get away from it. Okay? The GDP at 6.9, the volatility of the rupee, the present state of the Sensex demands that we rethink our business principles, put down the most optimistic scenario for the future, the most pessimistic scenario for the future, assume the worst. When you assume the worst, anything else will be better than what you assume. You have to plan for the worst and actually hope for the best. And that's the kind of planning which I'd want us to do. As you manage in, you need to cut your costs, you need to trim your speed, you need to ensure that you're playing to your strengths. You need to alter value to the consumers, you need to reframe categories, you need to ask people in your ecosystem whether they can help you. Both of you can work together as you manage in. When you manage out, you need to invest in innovation, you need to invest in advertising, you need to invest in your current employees. The state and health of the mind of your current employee is very important if you want to win. Okay, so that's all I have to say, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time and attention.